Good morning. It is Tuesday, July 12th. We're here in the Commissioners' Chambers for the regular board meeting. We have a full slate of commissioners, the administrator, and the clerk of the board. So at this time, I'll call the meeting to order, and if you'd please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the first thing on the agenda is the office business, vouchers.
We have two vouchers today. Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $896,871.01 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Salary clearing payroll and emergency management payroll. Move for approval of salary clearing payroll and emergency management payroll in a total amount of $1,030,232.78 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. And now we move down to the consent agenda, and there's two items on the consent agenda today.
Move for approval of consent agenda items 1 and 2. As presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for the two items on the consent agenda. With no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next, we'll move down to the certificate of appreciation and Captain Diaz. 7 years of service to Franklin County. Captain Diaz, on behalf of Franklin County, I'd like to express our gratitude for your faithful service with the Franklin County Sheriff's Office starting September 9th, 2016 through June 30th, 2022 as a captain. Your contributions to the county and for your years of service have been invaluable. Please accept this certificate of appreciation for your dedication and professionalism. We hope you just know how much we respect you and have valued you as a colleague. You will be missed at Franklin County. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good job. Any other commissioners like that?
Just want to say thank you for your service, appreciate it, and congratulations on your retirement.
Thanks.
Sheriff?
So I want to make a couple of comments about Adam here. Adam joined us after a long career with the Toppenish Police Department where he was a chief. I've known Adam for, well, just a long time, I guess is the only way to put that. Adam came on board, was just going to be a deputy and then right off into the sunset, and he slowly worked his way up in the ranks, and he is instrumental with our hiring and our backgrounds and all of those issues for us, and he's just done a stellar job. And so I think, I'm not sure how many years you had in law enforcement, but
Just 29 and a half.
oh, yes.
Just 29 and a half,
Just 29
yeah.
and a half, yeah. Well, it's just, yeah, you know, it depends on who you're comparing to. So he had a little bit more of a career than just with the sheriff's office, but that friendship was invaluable for the county when he come on board for us.
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, Adam, for your service.
Appreciate it.
All right, we'll move on down to the Commissioner Administrator updates. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you. Last week, the Franklin County side of the Benton Franklin Mental Health Advisory Committee met for a little bit, kind of at the sheriff's request. Gave everybody kind of a chance to meet each other and talk a little bit about some of the issues that we're going to be addressing as an advisory committee. The full committee is scheduled to meet at the end of the month, I think the 29th. I may have the date wrong, but it's right around the end of the month. And I think we're well on our way to progress and making the right recommendations. Just Friday, the first draft of the bylaws of that committee were sent around to the members for their review and comment. So they'll be going through those, and we'll be getting some feedback. And hopefully that first organizational meeting will allow us to adopt some bylaws to operate by. That process is moving forward. Also had some discussion with city managers and other county administrators in Benton County regarding leadership at BCES. They're in the process of hiring a new executive director. That process, while it's being driven by the city of Richland, because it's technically a city of Richland employee, they invited other members of the BCES board to participate in those interviews. So they should be making an announcement shortly about that. The BIPIN project of upgrading the software is ongoing. There have been some significant challenges, as there usually are with a system of that size. But the team from Tyler, who's the vendor, and the city of Kennewick, who hosts that BIPIN network, working around the clock and weekends to get that up and going and make sure that it continues to be functional. Last week, we started a group of county facilities directors, county administrators across the state, meeting periodically to discuss House Bill 1257, which is the Clean Buildings Act. We've had some discussions in our board meetings in the past about specifically how that impacts this facility as well as the Apple Center, and the requirements coming down from the state to meet certain energy standards starting in, I think, 2027. Other counties are in a position, some are actively pursuing projects, some are in the phase of, what do we do with this and how do we implement it? So Franklin County's experience is going to be helpful to them, but we're also learning from them as to what the impacts of that legislation are and how we implement it. And then I listened in on the WASAC Virtual Assembly yesterday, where they gave an update of the state's progress for various counties on the voluntary stewardship program, of which Franklin County has an active task force working on our compliance with VSP under the Growth Management Act. Thank you.
Commissioner Peck?
No major things to report this week. I spent the last several days traveling out of the country and got back about 2 hours ago. So that's really it for this week. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen?
So had the Ben Franklin Transit Planning and Marketing meeting. Discussion there was trying to increase ridership, and they're also wanting input on fare collection. Currently, spending on fare collection on cash tickets, they're spending 50% of that cash fee just on the collection of fares. So looking for alternatives as far as that goes. Also had a meeting with Greater Columbia Behavioral Health, also attended the WASAC meeting, and also attended the first initial gathering of the Franklin County Mental Health Advisory Board just as a spectator, but just wanted to meet everybody there. So I think it was a good meeting and a lot of interesting questions and ideas came out of it. One of the stumbling blocks is the 3-day hold, but it was said at the meeting that that 3-day hold does not apply to anybody with substance abuse, only to mental health patients, which was said to be less than 4% of the total people that come in. So just waiting to get some clarification on that, but that is it for my weekly update.
Well, Veterans Advisory Board, we had a difficult time. We couldn't get logged in for the meeting. We're trying to figure out what happened, maybe make up the meeting or wait till next month. Ben Franklin, operation and maintenance, again, fares was part of the topic there, and we're having a meeting with the new general manager tomorrow night for a workshop, and then the next night for our regular meeting. It's going to be interesting to see the new general manager and her idea of Ben Franklin Transit here in Tri-Cities, with the amount of participants on the buses and with her how she handled the TriMet down there in Portland, where she canceled bus routes when they didn't have enough ridership. It's going to be interesting to see how she handles what's going on here in Pasco. Met with the Pasco Broadmoor Development, went through that meeting, talked to them, and then we had almost a catastrophe here, and I don't think too many people are realizing what transpired here this last week. We got word that the Potholes Canal had a rupture, and that we may be out of water for 3 days in the Columbia Basin. There's a sense of panic that struck the basin, because if 3 days without water in the desert, things burn up. They think they have it fixed. We have our water was only shut off temporarily for probably, because they had to shut it down to fix the canal that almost breached. And if you see the pictures, if it breached, we were going to be without water for the rest of summer. This is how dramatic it was. It was quite a tense time for us, but they fixed it and they rejuvenated the canal, and we were only without water for about 6 hours. But they had to recharge the whole system. And I don't think we're out of the woods yet on this, because looking at it, there's a lot of vegetation down below. This has been leaking for a long time, so something that's going to have to be addressed in the off season, getting this more reliable water delivery to the basin. But it was quite a week. That's it for my report. We'll move down to the public comment. Is there anybody for public comment in the room? Anybody on the phone?
No one on the phone.
Seeing no public comment, we'll move down to amend agreement between Benton and Franklin counties and provision of services by Human Services. Kyle Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And I, just to follow up on the Veterans Advisory Board, I'm probably the least technical person in my office, and I didn't realize that the people that had the code to open
Weren't
the
there.
meeting weren't there. And so it took me about 10 or 15 minutes to track down the code, and by that time, the only other person that was on was Tim from the auditor's office. So, so that's when I sent out the email, so I apologize. But on the same subject, I've got two items before the board today that are related to each other, and they're both with regard to advertising and hiring for the Veteran Service Officer. And so to be able to do that, I needed to amend the memorandum of agreement between the two counties to include language in there for that position. And then the second item is to amend the relief fund policy to add language with regard to the Veteran Service Officer also. So those were the items that were amended with regard to the memorandum of agreement. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to do my best to answer those.
Questions, commissioners?
No questions.
Kyle, I'm looking at the read-ahead materials, and the joint resolution says that the two counties that operate a bi-county Department of Human Services for decades without a formal agreement. And then the next line says Benton and Franklin counties entered into an MOA with an effective date of January 1st, 2020. Wasn't that an agreement between the counties?
Well, yeah, and I think
Maybe you could just make the distinction so that people understand.
Yeah, my apologies. That's prior to that agreement. I was not able to find any contractual language, any agreement that outlined the roles of human services when it was by county agency. I think it began as a by-county agency back in the late 80s, early 90s. And so we have had an agreement. As Commissioner Peck had stated, it was amended, I'm sorry, not amended, renewed.
Yeah.
And then and the current agreement, I believe goes until 25, had gone until 2025. The purpose of this is just to amend and restate the agreement. It'll still expire in June of 25, but it includes the language with regard to the Veteran Service Officer.
Yeah. And I think there was another agreement several years prior, back when it was a by-county and not as it is now, but I don't have any concerns with that. I don't even think that that's necessarily relevant. We have an MOA that's been in place for a couple of years, and we're just updating it, but, excuse me. I'm just noting the language in the resolution. It kind of says we don't, and then it says we do, and that's
Okay,
all.
yeah, my apologies.
No big deal.
That's on me.
No, it's not a big deal. I just wanted clarity for people that are listening.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion for the amendment.
I don't know that we have a resolution number in our,
2022-152.
so move for approval of joint resolution 2022-152 in the matter of amending and restating the MOA between Benton and Franklin counties regarding provision of services for the Benton Franklin Human Services Department.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Are we going to reschedule that veterans meeting, or are we going to wait till the next month for the next meeting?
I've not received any response from the board members requesting to reschedule it. I think in the email I sent out, I had a brief the advisory committee on where we were at with this process, and so I was waiting at the.
I don't think we really need a meeting now. We got this passed. Now
Yeah, and I think that was kind of what I was feeling. I felt like if there was a request for a meeting, that I would have heard some feedback from the advisory board members.
Has Benton County already passed this resolution also?
No, this will go before them, not next Tuesday, but the following Tuesday.
Okay. All righty, thank you, sir.
Actually, I have the next item.
Oh, you have the next item too.
Correct.
All right, so, okay. Update Franklin County Veterans Assistant Fund Policies and Procedures.
So, as part of the process, I needed to update the policy to include the Veteran Service Officer position, and I needed to correct one issue that had been amended in the previous policy, but there was a problem with the resolution. Legal pointed out to me, where there was an increase for the allowable assistance from $1,000 to $1,200.
Right.
That was in the last amended policy, but there was language in the resolution, and apparently I need to work on my resolution writing, that it outlined another part of the change, but it didn't outline the $200 increase. So legal felt like that was something I needed to clean up.
Gotcha.
With this. So it was something that was in the previous policy, but it was not clear in the resolution that I put before the board when we signed the policy, so we've not initiated that part of it. I was waiting till today to correct that and add the language to the policy with regard to the Veteran Service Officer.
So this is just verifying or cleaning up from $1,000 to $1,200 a year per applicant.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's not a month.
And adding the language for the Veteran Service Officer.
Gotcha. All righty, and this is resolution 2022-153.
Move for approval of Resolution 2022-153 in the matter of the County Veterans Assistance Fund Policies and Procedures Update.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you.
All right, next we'll move on to closed record hearing, and it's not marked on our schedule as that, but it is a closed record hearing on CUP 2022-04, subdivide approximately 25 acres into 22 single-family lots, Underwood, presented by Derek.
I don't believe this is a CUP, is it?
You're on the next one. It's the, we're at sub 2022-04.
Yeah,
Closed
that's what,
record.
approximately 25 acres into 22
Right, it-
single.
It's not a closed record hearing.
No, it is a closed record hearing.
It is a closed record hearing.
But
He
it's for a
told,
subdivision, not a conditional use permit.
he told me that was supposed to be a closed record hearing, so that's why I made that close. So at this point in time, I'm opening the closed record hearing. So go ahead,
Thank you.
Mr. Bratton.
As stated, this is a request to subdivide parcel 126-210-021. It's generally located west of Columbia River Road, west of Fraser Drive, and east of the Columbia River. Comp plan designation of rural shoreline development, and it's rural community 1 zoning.
Can we turn the audio up, please?
Am I, oh, see, earlier it
Might
was
just get
like
it closer.
picking up everything I did. Now it's not.
There you go.
Speak right into it, if you would, please.
Is that, okay,
There you
there
go.
we go. All right, like I'm a rock star. Okay. Current property size of the parcel is approximately 25.67, and they're seeking to create 22 single-family residential lots. The The overall property originally is basically a crop circle that was 156 acres. They came and short platted off these 22, or 20, roughly 26, 25.67 acres. And this is the subject area for the proposed subdivision. This is a proposed map, or plat map. So access will be on the Fraser from that single point. Then all the other lots, they will have direct access onto the interior lots, no direct access onto Fraser. Site picture, it's a crop circle. On April 28th, technical agencies, property owners, and were notified. Notice was posted in the graphic. We also posted the site as well as made our SEPA SEPA determination and submitted that to the SEPA registry. We received comments from the following agencies. SEPA mitigations that were required basically are that they need to follow the recommendations of their geotechnical report. They'll need to get a construction stormwater general permit from ecology. They'll need to follow best management practices regarding dust. And they will require a professional archaeological survey before construction can begin at the site. They need to comply with fire provisions. Drainage systems shall be designed to capture and dispose of stormwater. They'll need to provide a separate source of irrigation, and they will be limited to 5,000 gallons per day in the aggregate from all the exempt wells. So they're site-specific exempt wells with an outside irrigation source. Planning Commission suggested the following findings of fact. That the provisions have been made for public health, safety, and general welfare. It does contribute to the orderly development and land use patterns. It's, the comp plan and the zoning both support this proposal. The public use and interest will be served. Does conform to the general purposes of policies or plans. The it does conform to the comprehensive plan and zoning requirements, and it does conform to the general purposes of the subdivision ordinance. Various comments, conditions, a total of 4 conditions, but they're actually broken into 34 sub-conditions and requirements are recommended for this proposal as found in the staff report and provided for in the resolution. And there's a suggested motion. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions, commissioners?
Derek, would you go back a slide?
Sure.
Provision of water and irrigation collectively no more than 5,000 gallons per day, including for irrigation purposes, may be used from exempt wells in this development.
Correct.
Maybe just some clarity for the record, and if I get any of this wrong, or if I step outside the record, stop me. Okay?
Will do.
No more than 5,000 gallons, that's a limit for potable residential use, right?
It's full use of a property, so if there is no outside irrigation source, then they're limited, they're still limited to that 5,000.
So you're going exactly where I wanted to go. Did you say in here that a separate source for irrigation shall be provided?
Yes,
Okay, so this particular number wouldn't include irrigation,
that's correct.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
okay, just
Yes.
clarifying, because people
Yeah.
who aren't acquainted with these rules would, I think, logically be confused. So it's no more than 5,000 for household use. And were that stock watering, for example, it would be unlimited.
Right, and
So-
that's a different
Right,
subject.
exactly.
right.
So all I'm doing is getting some clarity here. And the 5,000 gallons is per well, per property. It's not the aggregate for all of them, obviously.
Nope,
And the approval on those, sorry, go ahead.
no, so
That's really where I was going. Is it a subdivision limit or an individual
it's a
limit?
subdivision limit. So all 20 of those lots in combination shall not use more than 5,000, and that's why they need the outside irrigation source.
And who is, within the record, who's imposing that requirement?
That's ecology. That's the requirements associated with wells.
Well, before you
I
go
mean-
too far, you know,
Right.
there are several categories of exempt wells, and Department of Ecology does oversee those. You're absolutely correct. But typically, that's a well for a property or a parcel. And so this, it sounds like you're saying, and we've heard this in the past, that the 5,000 applies to the entire development. And would we have 20 lots there?
Yes,
22.
22, yeah.
Just for sake of simple discussion, if it were 10, it'd be 500 gallons a day per unit.
Per household,
And
right.
if there's 20, which there are actually 22, it's about 250 gallons.
Correct.
So did Ecology say, and again, stay within the record, that this has to be 5,000 for all 22 lots?
Yes.
Okay. And so an exempt well and an approved well from Ecology are two different things. So my question is, are these exempt wells or are these wells being permitted by Ecology?
These are exempt wells, and under state law, the exempt wells have that limit.
Per well normally, and this is being extended. This is the point I'm getting to, is that normally if you go out and you have a parcel of ground, and even if it's 1 acre, and you put in an exempt well, which doesn't require an ecology permit, you have this 5,000 gallon limit, plus you have unlimited water for stock watering. And I'm looking at the 5,000, saying with 22 lots, that starts getting pretty skinny. And so if Ecology is requiring this, it's no longer an exempt well. I think it would be a permitted well, but I just want to be clear, you're telling me this is not a permitted well?
When you go, so the exempt well, Hearst ruling, all those little things, the legislature made a fix. And the rule is, with an exempt well, you have a limit of 5,000. When a party desires to do what we've got here, like around 28, that collectively, that they view it in the aggregate. It's based on ownership, interest, and some other metrics that they have. And they consider that a single, so that's why you're limited in your number, and you have to have outside irrigation, or it
Okay,
won't
so
work.
I
If they
wanna-
don't
I
have,
want to stay within the record. The 5,000 a day limit for domestic use for an exempt well, which means not a permitted well, includes a half acre of irrigated grounds. You're requiring an additional water source for the irrigation. All that's in the record and it's been covered. What I'm really trying to get to is 5,000 gallons per day for all 22 lots. That requirement, which is in the record, is being imposed by us or by Department of Ecology, and you said ecology. Did I hear that right?
that's what they have said, how we're
Okay.
supposed to
Did
apply
they
it.
issue any kind of a permit for this well? For these wells?
No.
Okay. All right, so I'll take it up separately outside the record, because I
Okay.
believe I see a disconnect between the legislation on exempt wells and what has effectively become a permitted well system. So, but again, I don't want to go outside.
I may not be using the right terminology, and if that's the case, I apologize.
Well,
but
ecology
it's-
certainly has the authority,
That's where the rule
to-
comes
to-
from.
and that's what I was asking, is that's where it came from. So I don't think that they're any longer exempt wells. That's really, but let me take that up outside, because I want to stay within the record here.
Yeah.
Last time we had one like this, I asked you about it, and you were going to check for me. And
Oh, and I
we're still working
apologize.
on that.
Okay. I can get you that, yeah. You go right to the webpage, it's there.
Well, if this were 40 lots, yeah, you'd have a whole different.
We wouldn't be able
I'm
to
going
do
to
it.
stop there because I really
Yeah.
want to stay within the record, but
Okay.
maybe we can just talk about it offline some more.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is there any other questions?
So is each lot drilling their own well, or is this a community well?
No, each lot would drill its own well. And it starts getting in, I'm trying to remember what all's in the record exactly as far as analysis goes.
Well, the record says they're exempt wells, and it
There-
says
yep.
5,000 gallons a day
Right. No, and
across
that's-
22 lots.
Yep. It has to do with what we call, or what I call ERUs, which are the amount of water used by a single household. There's a calculation based. The applicant does have an analysis, and these are all been reviewed by ecology, and it meets their parameters as to, but it is the limit. We're looking at the limit. You can't really do this for more than 22 lots. It just, after that point, your numbers they exceed the limitation. And you have to have an outside irrigation source. If you don't, your number of lots gets cut in half.
And if your neighbor fills his swimming pool, the other 21 lots don't have any water left.
See,
But
and that, yeah,
let's just-
that's not an us thing, that's a them thing. They need
Let's-
to figure a
let's
fix
talk
on that.
Offline, outside this
Yeah.
particular application.
Okay.
Who monitors the usage? Okay,
Nobody.
all right, thank you.
Well, ecology will be, because
I think
they're
they're going to
putting
be
monitors
required.
on wells right now.
Yeah, at this point, there has not been a requirement to meter wells.
There's no requirement today, is there?
That's what I said. At this
Yeah.
point, there is no requirement to meter wells.
I thought I heard Commissioner Didier say that ecology is putting meters on wells.
In some areas they are, but it's not a statewide requirement.
Exactly.
For domestic subdivisions like this, they are?
Yep.
And some local jurisdictions are doing it as well, on their own.
Okay.
They're just doing it because they decided
Okay.
they wanted to do it.
Outside the meeting, if you would, give me an example of any subdivision that we've done in this county where that requirement exists.
No,
Outside
that's
the
what I
meeting.
said. There is none in Franklin
Not in our
County.
county.
Or where they've done it.
I'll look into it. It's granted, it is a rumor. I don't know specifically, but I'll
I've
look.
looked into it, but thank
Okay.
you. We're good.
Is there any other questions?
I have no other questions.
So if there's no other questions, I would entertain a motion. At this time, we'll close the closed record hearing and entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion that we approve Resolution 2022-154 as presented.
Second with discussion.
There's been a motion and a second to pass Resolution 2022-154 with discussion. Commissioner Peck.
Derek, working from the information that's in the record, should we approve this and we find out that these water limits don't apply or aren't monitored or are somehow not accurately portrayed, what's the recourse? What do we do then?
You mean like in the future, say 10 years from now, all of a sudden, I'm trying to figure, and it's determined that they're exceeding those limits? Is that what you mean?
Well,
What would we do?
Yeah, I've heard it suggested. In fact, I think the chairman said that Ecology is putting meters on wells, which is news to me for this kind of a use, subdivisions. But if that turns out to be the case, once this is approved, there's no recourse. If the information that we presented is not accurate, then it just stands.
As far as I
Doesn't
know.
threaten the subdivision development.
As far as I know, that would be the case.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
No.
There's been a motion and a second to pass Resolution 2022-154. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Next, we'll move down to closed record hearing, CUP 2022-02, additional asphalt storage tanks, and it's Resolution 2022-155. Mr. Bratton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a request to,
And at this time, I'll
Oh,
open
yeah.
the closed record hearing. Go ahead, Mr.
as,
Bratton.
as stated, this is a request for Ergon Asphalt to expand their facility on, it's addressed off of Self Landing Road, but it's actually located in the BNSF right-of-way. It doesn't actually have a parcel number. And this is not uncommon for these types of facilities to locate there. But, so the zoning's I2 general industrial, with a comp plan of rural industrial. And the total site is approximately 6.92 acres, but the area of interest is, or where they're actually building, is approximately 1.14. It's located north and west of South Landing Road, east of Glade North Road, and south of Alder Road. And they're seeking to expand their existing plant to adding 2 asphalt tanks totaling 40,000. And this is a CUP facility, and since they're expanding it, their capacity, that's what triggered the need for them to apply for a conditional use permit. So here's the site location. That's Self Landings right there. And this is the BNSF right-of-way. And there's the facility, and they're looking to drop the 2 tanks, one there and one there. So these are existing, these are the proposed new. Some pictures of the site. On April 28th, notice was sent to technical agencies, property owners with 1 mile, and the Franklin County Graphic, and the property was posted, as well as the SEPA determination of non-significance. It's in the I-2 zoning district, and it's an industrial use. That's a pretty broad area, but certain applications, certain uses such as asphalt and some other heavy industrial do require conditional uses in the I-2 zone. The proposal will not adversely affect the public infrastructure. It's been out there for decades. I and my office is not aware of any complaints regarding the facility, so it seems to be in harmony with the surrounding uses. And it's located right along a railway line, so the location and height of the structure site, same thing. We've been there. It's been there for years. Never had a complaint or an issue that we're aware of. It's, again, wouldn't be more objectionable because it's on a train track. I mean, the train disturbs things way more than any activity at that site. There's no, like, really residents or anything near there. I mean, there's some scattered in the vicinity, but the majority of the uses are either farmland or industrial or ag, like facilities. And then there's no risk to the public. The standard, in addition to our standard conditional use language, they'll need to have a construction stormwater pollution prevention plan. They'll have to follow best practices, management practices regarding dust. They have an inadvertent discovery requirement because that site, though they're building these tanks, they've been driving on that. It's all gravelled. It's a developed site. So, and the digging actually would be rather limited. They'll have to drop some foundation bases, and that's about it. As far as digging goes. Drainage system needs to contain stormwater runoff on site. They'll need to meet the requirements of the Public Works Department, and we need to make sure that they're aware that it's a right to farm area, not that I think farming activities would disturb them. And happy to answer any questions, and I do have a suggested motion.
Questions, commissioners?
How long have they been there?
I want to say since 86, 87, sometime in the 80s, if I recall correctly.
Will they have to do any work to the access to the road right there in front of them?
There'll be a due to the valuation exceeding the threshold number of 25,000, they'll have to get a public works review of their access. So if their access meets standard, then they'll be fine. They won't have to do anything more. They're not really envisioning increased traffic per se, except for on a nominal level. They're just those 3 tanks that are already in existence. That's what's in them. There's asphalt and emulsifier. It's just a larger capacity storage. So it's not envisioned that they would need to do any improvements because it's not really much of a change. It's just that because they're expanding capacity, we have to go through the process of them.
Because it goes beyond the $25,000 threshold.
That's what triggers a permit or an access permit review.
Yes.
That would be the case for any construction that exceeds 25,000. That's in valuation. Whether or not you're going to have to improve an access, widen it, do things like that is generally based on the use and the amount of traffic being generated from the site. And this expansion is not expected to add much more traffic, if any, to the site. It's more of a storage capacity facility. They're expanding their ability to have more product, but they're not necessarily making more. They're just or having more activity on the site. It'll be based on the jobs available that they're hired to provide asphalt for. But these tanks are for the purpose of storing more asphalt on site.
No other questions. The only reason I ask is because of the access permit, because I don't believe it has anything to do with added traffic. It has to do with the value of the transaction.
Well-
And the only reason I ask is because, you know, we've had other people that have done, where they've split off their property, where there's been no valuation change, but have had to address the access issue.
Those are different items, and I'd be
Okay.
more than happy to. And,
All right.
and I think Craig also would be able to provide some, but subdivision has certain triggers under subdivision law that, for example, well, subdivisions have different regulations associated with what can and cannot be done, requirements of set-asides for easements, things like that. The $25,000 threshold regards primarily whether or not it's an opportunity or a flag to go out and check. Is that access at the point of it coming onto the county road? Is that up to current standards? And that's the aspect that would apply in this circumstance. And/or if there was an expectation of, say, an increased traffic volume from this expansion that hit a certain threshold, then that could trigger road improvements or various other things, but it just doesn't reach that standard. So that's, and then with subdivisions, you can't create what we call an orphan lot. So sometimes you're required to create an access in those things, and then we have fire access issues. So all of those things are kind of interrelated, but they're very different, and the triggers and the thresholds are different for each application.
All right.
So Craig, could you back up one slide?
Oops, you said one slide?
Yeah. The project shall comply with the requirements, recommendations of the Franklin County Planning, okay. I'm looking for the construction stormwater pollution prevention plan. If you back up to the pictures of the existing tanks, I did not see any containment around those tanks. Is there containment for a rupture on those tanks that are there?
They would be built to the standards associated with, again, we start getting into some other agencies that have to sign off on the proposal. There's different ways they can do it. They can have it could also just be a slope grade
Yep,
effect that makes it so that it just won't go up. It always comes down.
The
But
reason I'm asking is because that wasteway is right there too. I know this area.
that is one of the comments that was, and they will need to coordinate with the Wasteway regarding that. That was one of the Skibbit comments, such that, hey, that's kind of close to our stuff. You need to make sure, and
It
so
doesn't-
they'll
yeah.
coordinate with them
Okay.
to,
That's my only concern,
Yeah.
because I know that a lot of farmers with storage tanks, they're putting pouring containment around their tanks to
Yeah.
contain any leaks so that it
Yeah.
doesn't contaminate the soil or water.
yeah, the specifics, when we're in the review of the actual permitting of the structures, that's where we'll get into those details. We'll vet that with the irrigation department if it's not already pre-vetted. A lot of
Okay.
times they'll provide us with that information at the time of application.
Okay. Any other questions?
Derek, in condition of approval number 9. Says the permit, which is a CUP, applies to the lands, the described lands, and shall be for the above-named individual. And it says that may not be transferred, meaning the permit may not be transferred to other individuals or entities or another site. Any changes proposed, et cetera, have to come back to this board for a new CUP. Where does that requirement come from? And before you answer, my understanding is that in Washington State, CUPs like this would be attached to the land and the project, and that it would in fact be transferable to future owners who accept the terms and conditions of the CUP. I've never dealt with a CUP for an asphalt storage tank, so maybe the conditions and requirements are different. But with respect to this project,
The intent of this.
Yeah.
It should
So,
not
so
read.
I've owned property in Franklin County that carried CUPs, and we specifically had them attached to the land so that they were transferable and that they run with the land. And my understanding is that's compliant with state law, but I'm not 100% sure. That's just the experience that I had with CUPs in this county.
This, okay, it depends generally on the application. This should have been assigned to the land, not the individual. I apologize for that. The individual clause is usually when you're working with a specific service provider that's kind of been vetted or something, or they're doing a specific use on the property. And you assign it if there's a transfer of ownership. So the intent was that it was transferred to, that it applied to the property. That's the way the CUP's been on that property from day one. It was not intended to be.
I'm having trouble hearing
It
you.
was not that's because I'm embarrassed.
The existing CUP is assigned to the land.
To the land, yes.
Right,
Yes, and that was the intent.
That was the intent here. So because this is a closed record hearing and this is part of the record, if we wanted to, the board could amend this without going to a closed record appeal hearing.
Correct.
And because you could label it a number of things, an oversight, a scrivener's error, whatever.
Right.
But that is permissible.
That's my understanding. Yes, it is.
Okay, all right. So
You
if
can
we get to the,
approve with conditions or
right,
deny.
if we get to a motion, then I'll either condition my vote on that, or I may just make the motion and take care of that for you. But I appreciate you clarifying, because it's very important to the property owner. It speaks to the value of the permit. It speaks to the certainty that a future operator would have
Yep.
to continue that operation. So,
Yeah, no, I
Okay.
apologize. And
no, it's fine. We're good.
Any other questions? Okay, if no further questions at this time. I'll close the closed record hearing and entertain a motion.
So I'd move for approval of CUP 2022-02 with the following correction to item 9 of the conditions of approval. Specifically, sentence 1, that says this permit applies to described lands and shall be for the above-named individuals. The condition change would be to end that sentence with the word lands and strike the words and shall be for the above-named individual. And then the second sentence in condition 9
remove not.
should be stricken. And the third sentence, which currently reads, any changes or proposed changes in ownership or operation will require the application of a new conditional use permit, should be corrected to read, the County Planning Department and Board of Commissioners shall be notified of any change in ownership or operation under this CUP.
That's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Been a motion and a second with those corrections. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All right, Derek, thank you.
Thank you.
And next, we'll move down to the public hearing. And under the public hearing for proposed 2023 through 2028 road program presented by Mr. Erdman, this will be open to the public for any public comment. So at this time, I'll open the public hearing for the TIP 2023 to 2028. Mr. Erdman.
Please, the board, if I might have a minute, I can get some.
Get a second here to load up the computer? Absolutely. So while we're loading that computer up, I Googled, and the Yakima River Basin, Yakima County Superior Court requires holders of confirmed water rights to meter to their water use. Well, Yakima County Superior Court issued the metering order, and it affects Benton, Kittitas, and Yakima counties for water meters.
And in the case that we previously discussed, water rights were not applicable. There are no water rights there. These are exempt wells.
You ready, Mr. Erdman?
Just give me one more minute and I'll be there. If I can. Oops. The purpose of this hearing is to review the proposed six-year transportation program for Franklin County for the years 2023 through 2028, and to hear testimony in favor of or against the adoption of the program. RCW 36.81.121 requires counties to prepare and annually update their six-year transportation improvement program pursuant to one or more public hearings, and to file a copy of the adopted transportation improvement program with the Washington State Department of Transportation and the County Road Administration Board. The Transportation Improvement Program represents the county's priority transportation improvements, and all projects listed within the program, regardless of ranking, are eligible for state, federal, and county road funds. The Transportation Improvement Program may be changed after it's adopted to add new projects, delete projects, and change projects to accommodate cost, schedule, scope, and funding changes. The first 4 years of the plan are financially constrained, meaning that the projects have funding or that funds are reasonably available. The investment level is based upon the anticipated amount of the funding available for the various sources. This does not guarantee that projects will be funded. And I'll be happy to answer any questions from the board.
Questions, commissioners?
Not so much a question, but an observation. You, of course, are absolutely correct that there's no guarantee of funding on these, but on occasion, additional funding becomes available.
Correct.
And the obligation and commitment on these projects can actually go down further on the list when we get additional funds, which has happened in recent months.
Correct.
Yeah. Just so that people understand that it isn't just a case of funding might be short and we don't get as far down the list as we think, that actually in the past year or so we've couple cases gotten more money. So
Yeah.
There's reason to be optimistic that we could actually do more than that original commitment list.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
It is more fluid than it appears.
Right.
And unfortunately, it works both ways.
It does, yeah. And Franklin County has been a beneficiary of additional funds
Yes.
recently, so. I move for approval of Resolution 2022-156 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for a resolution, at this time, before the motion. If there is any public comment, because this is an open public meeting. If there's no public, nobody on the phone, Keith, at this time, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
So moved, as previously stated.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2022-156. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. With that, Keith, we'll move down. Thank you, Mr. Erdman.
Thank you.
Administration office business.
Yes, we have for consideration today a resolution 2022-157. It follows the requirements of state law for when a county wants to sell real estate. That first step is to declare that piece of property as surplus and grant authorization to dispose of that via public auction. The requirements under the Washington Code are that the county treasurer administers that auction. Our treasurer's office uses a online service called GovEase. They've used that for a number of years, successfully sold other property that we've had. And it is a online auction. It has nationwide coverage. Many governments use that as their auction service. And it has, like I said, both national as well as local coverage and marketing. About a year ago, we received a appraisal of that facility. It was appraised at about $327 and change. I'm going to say $328,000. Subsequent to that time, we know that there's been some changes in the real estate market. We had the assessor's office review that and kind of update that appraisal. I believe they came in at about $350,000 as their minimum appraisal. So I am recommending that the board approve this resolution to declare the Wilson House as surplus property and direct the treasurer to begin the auction process and require a minimum bid of $350,000. And we'll see where that takes us.
Any questions, commissioners?
What is the current lease amount?
We are under a lease with Lords, and the monthly lease rate is $2,500 a month.
Has there been any interest, or were they notified, any of the local auction companies that we have here in Franklin County? Because I believe we have at least two very well-qualified auction companies.
The state law is pretty specific that it's the treasurer's office that directs the auction process. They have indicated to us that they would use the GovEase auction process rather than a private provider. Well, GovEase is a private provider, but it's one with nationwide exposure.
Are these generally properties that are delinquent on their taxes, or are they properties that are in good standing?
We haven't sold a lot of, in fact, I'm not aware of any property that we've sold that's similarly situated to the Wilson House. It's usually been properties that we have acquired through a tax default.
And when does their current lease expire?
December 31st of this year.
So if it sells, they've got to honor that lease, the buyer.
It would be subject to that lease. Yeah, I'm sure we could navigate when the county would cease to collect that and when the new owner could take over that lease if it's different than Lord's.
I don't recall, but it seems likely that that lease agreement has a T for C clause, termination for convenience.
It does, but I don't remember the exact number of days that requires, whether that's 30 or 60 days.
What's the planned time frame for auctioning this property?
I suspect it would take 30 to 60 days to identify a buyer.
And the purpose for selling is just liability?
That's part of it. There is a vacant old building on the parcel. You might recall that there's actually two parcels involved. When I say there were actually two, it's a single parcel now, but at one time they were two separate parcels. We combined them a number of years ago. That second parcel has an old building on it that is not occupied nor occupiable. It's a safety hazard. It's broken down and not in repair and needs to be actually removed. But would be up to the new buyer to do that. we're experiencing some problems at the Wilson House with homeless people camping on the on the property, and it's accumulates garbage and waste and things that we'd like to not have to deal with, so that that liability is an issue. Secondly, Lord's has changed from a not-for-profit corporate model to a for-profit corporate model, and it puts the county basically in the real estate leasing business, which is not really our forte, nor I think most people agree that that's not something that the county needs to be necessarily engaged in. So the idea was to sell that property in the private market.
Was there any thought put into putting it back into 2 parcels and only selling the one?
Not a lot of discussion about that. I'm not sure what the benefit to that would be. It's certainly something the board could consider if you think that's a better approach.
I would be interested in knowing what the assessed value of the empty lot is if they were to separate it again. But
Yeah, I'd have to go back and do some more research on that to parse that out. But the appraisal that's been done assumes that it's just one lot or one parcel. And so it anticipates the cost of removing that outstanding building that's
sure.
there. Without that building on the property, presumably the value of the appraisal would go up.
No further questions.
So there is significant liability under Washington's joint and several liability law if somebody should commit a violent crime there and harm another person, and they use that abandoned structure to facilitate that crime, or a person is in there, even if they're trespassing or they're unlawfully and gets injured, we would almost certainly be sued, and I suspect we would likely have some liability there. Splitting them to treat them separately, I think, would end up with us not being able to sell the one with the abandoned property, which is probably the one we need to sell most to minimize liability for the public who really own it, not us. The avoidance of competition with the private sector real estate lease market, I think, is an especially important purpose for doing this. We should not be competing with our citizens who are leasing real estate. It was different when Lord's was a not-for-profit, but now it's a for-profit corporation out of Tennessee. Their parent company is. So I think we need to sell them. But I am curious, I think I heard you say that the decision on which auction vehicle to use to sell the property was the purview and implied the decision of the treasurer's office. But then in the resolution it says, whereas the Franklin County Board of Commissioners authorized the auction to be supervised by the county treasurer, and then sets a minimum if the treasurer in fact has the authority to sell these, and that's the authority to do it, not the Board of Commissioners. I'm curious why they need to be supervised by this board. I'm thinking that the authority for making the decision as to how to dispose of it may not rest with the treasurer's office, but may rest with this board. I just don't know the answer for certain.
My understanding of that RCW 3634050 directs the county to have the treasurer conduct that auction. And the purpose of the resolution primarily is to declare it as surplus property. That's within the specific authority of the board to declare it as a surplus. But then once they've done that, it's my understanding that the auction is to be supervised by the county treasurer.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm still unclear. who has the authority under the statute to determine the manner in which it's sold? Is that, perhaps we could take a pause and look at that statute. I asked the question because Commissioner Mullen asked some questions that suggest that he may, I don't want to speak for him, may think that a local auction house, one of the many that we have, would be a more financially advantageous sale to the county as opposed to GovEase. And I don't know anything about GovEase, so I can't have an opinion on that really. But I do like the idea of using local businesses to provide these services. I don't particularly care which one. We have multiple qualified auction companies. But it all hinges on the question of who has the authority to make that decision. Does it rest with the treasurer's office, or is it this board?
I'm looking up the RCW here.
And to be clear, I'm asking because I just don't know.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this is Sean Sand. Just looking at RCW 3634080, it appears that you can sell or convey at a privately operated consignment auction so long as it is open to the public. So you probably have to go through the normal procedures to determine who may run that consignment auction, but it seems like that's something that could be an option.
Well, we have used that process in the past, so I'm comfortable that it's an option. I'm trying to get to the root question of, is that the decision and purview of this board, or is that the decision and purview of an independent elected treasurer? If it's in fact the authority of the treasurer, I don't want to intrude on the treasurer's authority under the statute.
Yeah,
According,
we could certainly look at that and get you more details. It looks like certainly it's going to be under the supervision of the treasurer's office. I don't know if that means the treasurer is the sole determiner of how and the manner in which it's sold, or simply that they are the ones that supervise the proceeds and ensure that it complies with all the other state regulations and requirements.
yeah, and as part of this, of the resolution, whereas the Franklin County Board of Commissioners authorized the auction to be supervised by the county treasurer, we are giving her the authority to do this, and she has made it clear that she uses GovEase. So if we want to take that back out and assign an auctioneer here locally, then we need to do that.
If I may,
Go ahead.
I found a section of the requirements here. RCW 36.34.080, it's sales to be a public auction. Paragraph 1, all sales of county property ordered after a public hearing upon the proposal to dispose of the property must be supervised by the county treasurer and may be sold A, at a county or other government agency's public auction, including a public auction sale by electronic media conducted pursuant to RCW 3616-145, B, at a privately operated consignment auction that is open to the public, or C, by sealed bid to the highest and best bidder. Paragraph 2, all sales of county property must meet or exceed the minimum sale price as directed by the county legislative authority. So that's about as complete of a description as I think we're trying to get to.
Yeah, well, paragraph 1 sounded like once the treasurer is given the authority to sell it, it doesn't articulate who has the authority to determine in what method for the sale, and the resolution is written to leave that to the discretion of the treasurer, and that's certainly something I can live with. I would want to know if we were bound to sell it, if we didn't receive the minimum bid or the bid. I know the language says not less than $350, but in the past, with distraint auctions, I think we have come back around, excuse me, and sold properties that didn't meet the minimum. But is this something that has some Well, I guess there's two questions for me. One, is this something that has some urgency to it such that we couldn't get this clarification and revisit it next week? And the second would be, unless there's another commissioner who would prefer to see this sold by local professional auction services, unless there's another commissioner that wants to join me in that, then there's really no point in pursuing it, meaning pursuing this point. We could just move forward as is.
I think in our discussion we had months ago on this, we were going to see if there were interested parties that would be interested in auctioning it off, and I think we should give them the opportunity.
So then it sounds to me the question is, does the board have the authority to require the treasurer or to use a public auction service, or is that the discretion of the treasurer? And once we know the answer to that, if it's the discretion of the treasurer, then discussion's done, we have a resolution. If, in fact, it's the board that has that authority, then it sounds like there's a majority of the board interested in having a local professional auction service sell the property, which we have done in the past.
My understanding from the treasurer's office was that they were only willing to pursue this if they were allowed to use the Govey's auction software to do that.
The language in paragraph 1, I think, since you've got it there, if you could just read the first part of that, I think where it says, when authorized or directed.
All sales of county property ordered after a public hearing upon the proposed
There you go.
On
That's
the
what I was
proposal.
looking for, was ordered.
to dispose of the property must be supervised by the county treasurer.
Yeah, so the order, I believe, comes from the board.
Right.
And the process is supervised by the treasurer. And I now believe that the board has the authority to, in ordering that it be sold, stipulate the manner. I see we have somebody from the treasurer's office. I was wondering
Come on forward, Russ.
how long that would take.
Enlighten us, will you?
Sorry, so I just want to make some clarity. Josie is at a legislative conference, so I'm here on her behalf, Chief Deputy for Treasurer's Office. So the only issue or the reason the proposed language for that is to go through GovEase is we currently work with GovEase for our tax title and our foreclosure. We are not against any of the other auctions. The issue that we run into is if we would to go with one of the local ones, whether it's Muzzers or the one out here at Miltopia.
Booker.
Booker
Any of
auction.
those, they would do probably a great job too. There's no doubt about that. But
And,
to
and
do-
there are other auction companies too, but go ahead.
yeah, those are the two that come to mind, sorry. Actually, those are the two that I reached out just to kind of get a little bit of groundwork of what they would require. We would, you know, it would have to be opened up if we would do it. But the issue that we run into is, A, we'd have to open an RFP, which is the request for proposal. We'd have to draft that would have to be put together, that would have to be open. And then both of those places don't actually do title work in-house like GovEase does. So then we'd also have to do another request for proposal from a title company. And so that's just, we run into an issue of who's gonna administrate that and who's gonna go through that part. And if the board chooses to go through one of the local places, I mean, I guess I don't know for sure. I'm assuming you guys have the legal or the authority to do that. It's just you guys would have to probably find or select that company first, and then let the treasurer's office know which one is the winning bid and who to use it through. So I guess in summary, what I'm trying to say is I don't think there's any opposition from the treasurer's standpoint of who we would use. It's just GovEase is currently contracted with us, and that's who we use for our foreclosure stuff. And they have an in-house title company. They have in-house financial institute that does the wire and the money transfers and all that. So it's all in one place. It's ready to go. If the board approves it, we could start the publishing part and move it forward. But if the board chooses to go with a private local company, there would have to be some definition of who's going to do the RFP, how will the RFP be handled for both the auction side of it and the title side of it. And so that was really the reason this even came to be the way it is. I just wanted to clarify that.
Well, that's really helpful. I appreciate you doing it. Just real quick, I probably am one of the newer residents. Both these gentlemen have lived in this county much longer than I have. But in the roughly 20 years that I've lived here, we have used GovEase to sell properties, and I don't think I've ever seen an ad or a notice or marketing for properties for sale. I know it has happened with some of the distraint properties we've had, but I tend to...
So,
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be rude.
No, that's fine.
We actually, GovEase is year 2 that we're using it. Last year was the first year we've had it. So before we used to have public auctions in here in this actual room. And about 4 or 5 years ago, it was kind of a new way that most Washington County started doing auctions was online. You open it to a national level. And so we did bid for assets, and that was the main one that the county used. And the reason we switched to GovEase is GovEase was, bid for assets was more of a Northwest thing. GovEase was on the national level. But on top of that, the fees that they charged the end user was a lot less than what bid for assets was charging. And when they did a presentation, when we were going through the different companies, it seemed like they did a little bit more of an outreach. They had a little bit more publication. We have not had anything that we sold that's comparable to this, so, you know, I can't tell you exactly how they advertise.
Well, have we sold anything through GovEase?
No, this would,
This would be the
year is gonna
first.
be our first. So last year we had every property redeemed, so there was nothing actually for sale. We did sell through a bid for assets, which is equivalent to GovEase, just a little smaller than them, and we definitely had a lot more users that signed up than we would when we did it in person, because again, you got people that opened it up to, you know, California, Oregon, Idaho, wherever it was, and so you definitely saw the traffic more. You'd see a lot more users register. Just to even register and be able to bid, you have to put $1,000 deposit plus prove that you have certified funds, and so we definitely had a lot more participation. However, you know, we use that for foreclosure properties, and it's not very often that you foreclose on something from a tax perspective that's significant compared to what this is. I mean, there is times, but in the last 4 or 5 years where we use the online auction, it literally just be little pieces of land that are between parcels.
Sure. So we haven't sold anything with GovEase.
No.
We do have the authority to use a local auction company. We have used local auction companies in the past. Both processes have costs. And my view is that a simple RFP process to get however many local auction companies as we can to offer, you know, what they would charge to sell it, together with what I have observed as more active participation, meaning more potential buyers being reached by local companies. My underlying concern is that a national company that has I suspect has a static model. You know, they do a similar process for each one. May not have the local outreach that I think we need here. This is not an investment grade property that's going to entice somebody from Southern California to pay a bunch of money for.
And I can't speak on that. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. So anyway, I've probably already said too much on it, but if Commissioner Mullen or anyone else wants to join me in trying to have a local business provide this service for us as opposed to the other option, I would be supportive.
Did I hear you correctly saying that you reached out to other auction companies in Franklin
So
County?
I reached out just to see what we'd have to do to even to go through them, and it was just the RFP process and how that would look. And it was a very brief conversation I had with both through a phone call, but it was just more of a, what does an RFP need to look like for you guys? How much of that scope needs to be included in that? And
Did they show any interest? Okay.
I can't speak to that. I'm sure there was, yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, I feel that if we have the opportunity to use a local business that, especially on a piece of property that's more than just a tax foreclosure, we should at least give them the opportunity to reach out and see if they're interested.
In the past, when we've done this, once the proposals came in, the board selected 3 people. I think the last time our, Mr. McPherson was one of them. Our Public Works Director was another. I forget who was the third, but 3 more senior county individuals to take the proposals and go and review them and come back and make a recommendation to the board as to which one, considering fees, costs, services, reputation, all that. And when they came back, in that particular case, it was the 2 larger, better-known auction companies, and they said, we think both would be fully capable of doing a great job. This one's a little bit cheaper, so we lean that way. It was a pretty clean, pretty simple process.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of putting together an RFP, and I believe, from what I've had, the conversations I've had with them, is there wouldn't really be any direct costs to the county up front. It would be more on the buyer side. That's how I understood it. I mean, obviously, we have not seen the formal proposal, so I can't say
Right.
that. But
Right.
the cost shouldn't change from the county perspective.
Yeah. Well, if the sale price were to end up to be the same through GovEase or through a local business, I'd rather have the business go to a local company, obviously. And, yeah, let's see.
So Keith, at this time, why don't we table this and reach out to the local auction companies about the RFP, and we'll see if there's interest. And, because we've got a lease in through to December.
Yeah, I'm sure there's interest, so it's a matter of just running the
Yep.
RFP process.
All right.
That does take some staff time to do, but we can do that.
Yeah, and we have an RFP in our files that has been used before. I suspect it could be
Yep.
used verbatim.
So let's do that on that issue there, and we'll move on down to public comment. Is there anybody else for public comment?
George Dockstetter. I think you're also missing another opportunity. We probably have 8 real estate offices in Franklin County, if not more, and they could put the thing on the local multiple and put it on their offers to be opened in 45 days and give you an option to expose it to the whole Tri-Cities instead of just through an auction house. There's got to be at least 8 licensed offices in this county that can offer the same services as whichever way you go. Let's keep the money in Franklin County. Let's don't send it to some unknown entity, and you're not gonna, all you have to pay for is title insurance. That's the only difference, and they're offering you title insurance too. So we've got local companies that have been here, and we've got real estate offices that have been in business 30+ years. There's probably half a dozen of us that have done it for that long. Thank you.
Anybody else for public comment? Nobody on the phone, right, Keith?
No, sir.
Okay.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning.
Morning.
I wanted to say I really appreciated, Commissioner Peck, what you had to say about the exempt wells and the details you went to there. I think it's really, really important that we have a healthy or a robust skepticism of the ones that monitor those different processes, I guess. They're requiring no more than 5,000 gallons a day being pulled out of those wells, yet there isn't a mechanism for measuring that. And the healthy skepticism, I think, comes to the point where that they always take, they never give anything back, ever. And so it's a process to take a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And I think coming down the road, that's their intention. I believe that. And so a healthy skepticism and fully understanding the process. I appreciate you vetting the details as I was watching and trying to follow closely and researching a little bit as we were going there. I think that there is area there that could be a little bit clearer in the process, that we could understand a little bit better. And I think that would be helpful. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Sheriff, if I could just quickly add, one of the examples that I was trying to weave in there is that under a state Supreme Court in a lawsuit between Easter Day and Five Corners Family Farms, I think was the correct name for it. This goes back several years. The state Supreme Court ruled that it came down to literally a comma in the statute, and it said that the water use from an exempt well for stock watering was unlimited. And so here we've got that application, which was talking about a 5,000 gallon a day limit for 22 properties with or without lawn irrigation. Any one of those filling a swimming pool or stock watering could exceed those numbers. So you're absolutely right, Mr. Baumann. I think we need a lot more clarity on how that really works.
All right, is there any other items or interest for the good of the county? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.